And welcome to my episode on paleontology, where we take a bite out of prehistory. My name is Becky Barnes, and I'm a paleontologist with the North Dakota Geological Survey. I earned my master's degree, and I am the lab manager of the Johns Rood Paleontology Lab, located inside the Heritage Center. Today, we'll be doing something slightly different as we do a little walk through time into my kitchen. Welcome to my kitchen. Time can be kind of difficult to understand, especially when you get into big enough numbers. 10 is easy enough. Some of you might be pretty close to 10. That's called a decade. What if we add two 10s together? That's 20 years. That's called a score. What about 100? I bet some of you might have a grandparent or a great-grandparent that's pretty close to 100 years old. That's called a century. But what happens when we get to 1,000? Or 100,000? Or 1,000,000. When numbers get too big, we just don't have a good scale. So for this exercise, we're going to break things down into a little bit more bite-sized pieces. You'll need to gather some simple supplies if you don't already have them. I like variety, so I've picked up some different pudding flavors. Here I have chocolate and vanilla, some cookies, some gummies. Maybe you even have some leftover Girl Scout cookies. We're going to have to crush up these cookies, so if you happen to have a mortar and pestle, you can go ahead and use that. If you don't worry. You can just use a plastic bag, put your cookies in the bag, and then crush them using a rolling pin or even a potato masher. Now, if you're really not into cooking, you can get by using pre-made pudding cups. It works just fine. Or, if you're really into cooking, maybe you want to go all out and make a layered cake. That'd be pretty epic. Or you can follow along with me and do cooked pudding. It really just depends on how easy or how difficult you want to make this exercise. You're also going to need a clear container, preferably one with tall sides. You could use anything from a glass, or if you happen to have an empty jar, or even a really big mug. So for this exercise, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be building rock layers within your preferred glass. Now for North Dakota here, our rock layers from the surface last from about 85 million years ago to about 20 million years ago. We had this giant glacier that acted like a bulldozer and just crushed the top 20 million years of our rock history. So that leaves us with about 65 million years to work with for our math problem. I'll put some of the calculations in the comments below. You can just plop that pudding right in your glass, but if you want to up the difficulty level just a little bit, you can take your glass and a tape measure, figure out how tall that glass is, then mark it off on a piece of tape. My first glass here, from top to the bottom of where my pudding would sit, is about 5 3/4 inches. My second glass, a little bit bigger, measures, again, from the top of that glass down to where the bottom of the pudding would sit, is about 6 3/4 inches. So using the math that I just figured out, on my small glass, my first 3 layers are each going to be about 0.88 inches tall. So the Pier Formation, the Hell Creek Formation, and the Paleocene. You can use as many or as few rock layers as you would like. For North Dakota, I'm going to be breaking this into 4 different layers. The first layer is the Pier Formation. This is when North Dakota looked like a big ocean. The next is the Fox Hills and Hell Creek Formation, which I'm lumping together. This is when that big inland sea started to dry up a little bit, and we had more of a floodplain or a delta. Next is the Paleocene, which is just after the dinosaurs have gone extinct. North Dakota looks a lot more like the Florida Everglades than what it does today. And lastly, the Eocene and Oligocene, which we're also lumping together, just to make it a little bit easier. So let's measure out our distances. Each distance here on the first is going to be a little less than an inch long. So we'll scooch that over, a little less than an inch. A little less than an inch. A little less than an inch. And our last one is about 3 inches or so. So 1, 2, 3, right up to the top. All right, so there's our 3 layers. There's our first layer, our second layer, our third layer, and our fourth layer. Now on the big glass, it's a little bit different. We have, again, just almost right at that inch mark. A little bit taller at that inch mark. And then the rest. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next, simply take that tape and let's put it on our glass. Here's our short glass, right from the bottom where you would fill all the way up to close to that top. There we go. 1. And our big glass, right from the bottom all the way up. I left a little bit of wiggle room. You'll see why later. 2. So again, just to get that rough estimate for how deep your pudding should be, for that extra little bit of difficulty, just divide the height of your glass by millions of years. 85 million years ago, we had a big inland sea that split North America in half. It stretched all the way from the Arctic Ocean all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico. And North Dakota at that time was underwater. Lots of different creatures lived in the water, like fish, mosasaurs, sea turtles, squid, and swimming birds. The rocks they came from are called the Pier Formation, which is made up of that old sea bottom. Squished together for millions of years, that fine dirt and sediment became what we call shale. It's pretty grayish in color and flaky, with streaks of yellow volcanic ash. Volcanoes? Well, yeah. 85 million years ago, the Rocky Mountains were brand new and cranky. Okay, so here in my science lab, or kitchen, we're going to whip up a batch of Pier shale. And I think for that dark gray color, I think chocolate is going to work perfect. And for my volcanic ash layers, I think I'm going to crush up some nice shortbread cookies. So now what I've done is I've added all that yummy Pier shale chocolate pudding back into a measuring glass just to make it a little easier to pour. So let's get pouring, shall we? Now I'm going to layer a little bit of this pudding in each of the glasses and then sprinkle my volcanic ash over the top of it. And we're going to reserve the rest of this chocolate for our next layer. Also inside the Pier shale, like we said, are a whole bunch of sea creatures. Now, I don't have any gummy mosasaurs, but I do have gummy sharks. And I know my daughter would love to have some extra little gummy sharks added to hers. Next up, we start moving more towards the land. We're going to combine the beach and the delta sections of the Fox Hills Formation and the Hell Creek Formation, which are together in the late Cretaceous, to make things a little bit easier. The rock shifted between sand and mud, so you get these really cool layers. I'm going to cook up a batch of butterscotch pudding this time around to help me with those layers, and then alternate it with that leftover chocolate pudding. Here we have some chocolate cookies that we'll use for our KPG boundary extinction layer. The K stands for Cretaceous, because C was already used. And PG stands for Paleogene, which is the time period right after the dinosaurs went extinct. So this will be used for our asteroid impact layer, as well as our top layer of dirt. So don't use it all. For this method of crushing, I'm just going to use a plastic bag and a rolling pin. So for this next layer, I'm going to be alternating our leftover chocolate, some of our butterscotch, about half of it, chocolate chips, caramel chips, and butterscotch chips for those pesky little concretions and rocks that end up in this layer, gummy dinosaurs, because, I mean, who doesn't love dinosaurs? And we'll be topping it off with that crushed cookie crust. This is our asteroid impact layer. With most of the dinosaurs out of the way, there was now room for other creatures to fill in the environment. As we enter the Paleocene, crocodiles are now the dominant predator. North Dakota looks a lot more like the Everglades than what it looks like today. There are a lot of trees and plants in the swampy landscape, and many veins of coal thread through the rocks, along with more concretions. Thankfully for this section, we're pretty much already done with the pudding. We already have our butterscotch. And for concretions, I think I'm going to use some crushed up nuts. For our coal lines and our trees, we still have our leftover crushed up cookie. So we're ready to start decorating. Some of our muddy swamp bottom. Add some of that in there. A little bit more mud. Want some more coal veins. Some concretions. Now, not everybody likes concretions, so you can just add those to the people who actually like concretions. I like concretions. I like lots of concretions. And a little bit more swamp bottom. And some more coal veins. There were a lot of trees. About 55 million years ago, North Dakota began to dry out. It turned from Everglades to more of a savanna. There were fewer trees, and grasses began to take over the landscape. This represents the Little Badlands of North Dakota, stretching down to the Big Badlands of South Dakota. It's part of the Eocene, Oligocene, and Miocene time periods. Mammals are dominating the land, and we see our first horses, dogs, cats, pigs, camels, rhinos, and more. The rocks here are pale in color. They're sandy and silty, and that means it's time to mix up vanilla pudding. I'm going to be mixing up a double batch just because of how much space I have left in my mugs. A couple other features that I'm going to add to our Little Badlands are some shredded coconut and some macadamia nuts. Why? I'm so glad you asked. There are actually soil horizons placed throughout this time period, and occasionally throughout here you get these crazy little round balls that are actually dung beetle balls. These are actually little packets of food for their babies. Pretty good taste. There we go, soil horizon, soil horizon. These are areas where the sediment has started to decay and it's turning into dirt, where plants can grow. Dung beetle balls, macadamia nuts. Again, not everybody likes these, so make sure to ask. Now, to top this all off, we need dirt. Nice soil found all across North Dakota. Just top that off, a little bit of dirt here, a little bit of dirt there. All right, and let's get some grass. Sprinkles. There we go. Get some nice grass growing on there. Beautiful. Awesome. Perfect. Almost. I think we're missing something. We are in North Dakota after all. Snow! Of course! How about some hail? Marshmallows. Pew, pew, pew. Oh, it's hailing. Pew, 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 pew. Prehistory never tasted so good. This is definitely better than licking rocks. Make sure to share your creations and send me pictures. I want to see what you guys make. Paleontology totally rocks. Everyone, take care.